I can't clap like Patrick does, but unfortunately, he can't join us tonight. But luckily, myself and our resident boss man, Jared, are still here to help preview the 2025 offense for Penn State. And Jared, I think there's certain positions here that I think speak for themselves, and then there's others that we're going to get into a little later where, we're not, it could be a fast improvement or could just be a slight improvement, but an improvement nonetheless. But maybe we just go ahead and uh, delve into the quarterbacks first and foremost. Of course, Drew Allar, he's your starter. It's his third year as starter and his final one, of course, because he's a senior and out of eligibility. But part of the reason why Penn State is garnering so much national championship hype is in no small part because he's back as a starter. And, you saw the improvements he made last year, not just as a passer, or even as a runner, but also just in terms of confidence in leadership, in handling the heat. Now, obviously, he's got some. Penn State's going to win it all. He's got to improve in a few key areas. I think, namely,
Absolutely.
he's got to play better against the top teams on the schedule. I did have to his credit, he did have a pretty decent game against Oregon in the Big Ten championship, but against Ohio State and against Notre Dame, not a couple of games he probably would love to have back. So whether he doesn't even have to, put up video game like numbers. He just needs to be effective enough, because you got plenty of supporting cast from top, of course,
Certainly.
running back duo, which we will get into shortly, but he's got plenty of supporting cast. He doesn't have to do everything by himself. He just got to be effective, efficient against the Ohio States on the schedule. And so, and then I think the other thing I'm curious to look at is the battle for the backup spot.
Certainly.
Between Jackson Smolik and Ethan Grunkemeyer. I was covering the spring game for BSD a few months ago, and I'll say I remember watching those two play and thinking this is going to be a tight competition, and I was particularly impressed with Smolik because he missed all last year of an injury, and you weren't really sure what to expect. Like, could he actually recover and be able to challenge Grunkemeyer, who it seemed like was firmly grasping that number 2 quarterback position after Bo Pribula left. But I think it's going to be a fierce competition for that and also for the starting job in 2026. Jared, anything you want to add or just any thoughts of your own on the quarterback situation?
Yeah, let's just start with Allar before we move into the backup battle, because that's very intriguing. One of the most intriguing position battles heading to camp for sure. But with Allar, you kind of hit the nail on the head earlier when the first thing you said about what you noticed about him and as far as improvement in year 2 was his confidence. That really struck me. Just he was much more of a fiery leader. He seemed so much more comfortable in the offense, just comfortable in his own skin. I remember the season opener against West Virginia, and I think there's an issue with West Virginia either yelling out numbers or doing claps to try to create some false starts. And Drew, to his credit, really got in the referee's face. And I just remember thinking, whoa, this is a totally different Drew than we had in year 1 for sure. So I think what is going to be the key for him, which you also, had mentioned, is that, we saw a much more confident Drew Allar in year 2 as a starter. Now in year 3, can we see a much more confident Drew Allar in big games where, against Ohio State and against, potentially Notre Dame, a rematch in the playoffs, against Oregon early in the year, that the whiteout showdown, how's he going to come out and look? I think that he just came out a little bit too, was a little too fired up, a little too nervous, but there was throws that you would see him make all year. And he just, especially that first half of Notre Dame game, he just was not on. I mean, I think one big play that I remember watching and thinking, oh, I hope this doesn't come back to bite us was Penn State was up 7-0. They had 3rd and goal, and he had Nick Singleton just completely wide open in the flat and threw the ball way behind him. And Singleton tried to make the adjustment of dropping it. Although, to Singleton's credit, it should have been placed right in front of him rather than behind him. But there are just a lot of throws like that where I just think the moment got a little bit too big for him, and he just kind of lost track of his focus, his fundamentals, his footwork, and just the ball was just coming out wrong. So I think that is going to be, we saw a huge jump in confidence from year 1 as a starter, year 2. Now we're going to see that same jump in those big games and those key moments. Based off of the progress we saw last year, I like to say, yeah, I think that's going to happen, but obviously easier said than done. So. Yeah, but obviously Allar has got a lot in the line, could be a potential 1st overall pick. I think a lot of mock drafts, I know it's going to be a very quarterback heavy draft, most likely next year. Considering all the guys that are already have the NFL's attention, there'll probably be a couple guys that kind of come out of nowhere this year too, as well, and possibly fight their way into a 1st round pick. So, I've seen Allar like 4th or 5th on those lists so far. He definitely has the physical ability. He's got the talent to move up to number 1 even. So obviously a lot riding for Allar in addition to just everything that's on the line for Penn State this year and concerning the amount of talent they have coming back. And then moving on to the backup quarterback. Oh, sorry. Did you have anything to add on Drew before we move on to the backup?
Oh, no, keep going.
Okay. Yeah. Everything I've heard about the backup competition is, they're both doing very well and no one's really separating themselves, not because they're failing to create the separation, but they're both are doing a bang up job so far. Grunkmeyer, has more of the NFL body and NFL tools. Smolik, is more of a kind of in the mold of a Trace McSorley. So it just sounds like, he's got a great feel for the offense. They move the ball when he's in there. And with Grunkmeyer, he's got a ton of potential, and could really turn out to be a special quarterback, has the potential to be able to make the type of throws that many quarterbacks can't make. So it's going to be an interesting competition. And, I'm kind of curious to see how that all works out. If they both end up getting a little bit of mop-up duty, so it'll be interesting because obviously whoever wins that job has a great opportunity to become the QB1 in 2026.
Was just going to add, as you were talking about Drew and his, draft prospects, I've Mel Kiper's early mock draft from a few weeks ago, and he has Drew going 27th to the Rams. So, but he'll definitely have a chance to, obviously if he has a really great year this year, and of course you figure, I'm sure he'll put up some great numbers in the combines and whatnot. And so he could easily shoot up to like top 15, even top 10 draft pick, depending on the team's needs at quarterback.
Honestly, I think with his physical tools, he could potentially be the number 1 overall pick. If he just, shows a little more poise and polish.
Jake Klubnik, according to Kiper.
Yeah, I've heard him. I've heard Nussmeier, Lenora Sellers. I know some people are very high on him.
Yeah, so I'll tell you, there are
I think cover
3
ranked
quarterbacks I'm seeing on here. Yeah, 3. So he's got Klubnik going 1 to the Browns. He has Nussmeier 11 to the Colts. He's got Sellers, South Carolina, going 16 to the Steelers. Be a nice gift.
Okay.
Steelers fans. And he's got Allar going to the Rams. So there was, I guess, presumably to help groomed to be the heir apparent to Matt Stafford there or something. So but he's already being projected in the 1st round, late 1st round. But he can, like I said, I won't be surprised if he's eventually a top 10 pick, or even, like you said, maybe, he could end up being the number 1 pick.
Yeah, I mean, he's got the physical tools. He's got the NFL arm. I think it's just kind of, adding some more polish to his game, and they're gonna take a serious look at him at number 1 if he shows some improvement this year.
No question. Speaking of 1st round draft picks, another guy on offense who might be that guy is one Mr. Nicholas Singleton, running one of 2 returning running backs, along with Katron Allen. I think we've said plenty about these guys. They're both on track, it seems, to finish 1 and 2 amongst the rushing leaders. Will probably dethrone Evan Royster, who has held the record for the last 15 years, I believe. And so, I think by the time it's all said and done, those two will be 1 and 2 on the student bookstore steps for rushing leaders. But I was just it's funny. I was just watching. Do you ever watch those For the Bloggy videos on YouTube?
Yes.
So I was watching. It's Landon Tangwall. Love his material.
Yeah, from alignment.
Landon Tangwall was doing a breakdown of Singleton and just how he can, the little things he can do to improve his game. Just like it's about running in the open field. Like it's more, he was basically nitpicking how sometimes he tends to make a move too early on a defender who's in front of him rather than just running right at the defender and then making a move at the last, split second. So he's just putting on his little things like, runs that were decent gains, but could have turned into maybe like touchdowns or at least, really like explosive gains, 20, 30 plus yards. So and I think that's something I remember from reading some, I think, practice notes on minus 24/7, like with what Stan Drayton's been doing, the new running backs coach has been doing with Singleton Allen is just, working on, making that guy at the next level miss, or, being able to, from get to the second level and then just be able to make a move, get past the next guy, and then just be off to the races. So that's like the next step really for Singleton. If he, he has that home run hitter ability, and we've seen it, but he's just there's a couple little tweaks that need to be made for him to be a more consistent home run threat. Similar to what Saquon Barkley was in his prime. And so, well, he still is a home run threat, but but similar to what Barkley was back in the day when he was donning a Penn State uniform. So I think that's the big thing I'm looking for with Singleton, and we'll see if that happens. And then Allen, it's just I think we know what he is. Maybe just he just adds a little more breakaway speed. I mean, we know he's a powerful dude. He can knock people over. He's kind of more of the thunder to Singleton's lightning.
Sure. Yeah, he's always been a great, short yardage back. Doesn't have quite the same explosive breakaway speed as Singleton, but the thing that really struck me with Allen, especially last year, is I was a little concerned about him. Second half of the season, he just didn't quite look like himself. I think he may have just been a little dinged up. Some undisclosed injuries is just, not that I know that for certain, but just my educated guess, because he got a week off heading into the playoffs and he was just a totally different guy. I mean, I remember writing the MVP post after the Fiesta Bowl and mentioning that, all the hype of Ashton Genty and Catron ended up looking like the best running back on the field that day. Obviously he wasn't running against the same defense as Genty was, but yeah, I mean, he did just the way he closed out the season. I mean, and the fact that we'll get to the line, but just the experienced line and just his ability to kind of know how to run, how to be patient, how to wait for his holes, how to navigate with the line in front of him. I mean, he can definitely have a really special year this year. And I want to get back to Singleton. Some of the points that you made is, if you recall his freshman year, he was basically a track runner at first, where he got the ball, his shoulders were always up, and he was just kind of running straight, try to just run past the defense and just try to get to the end zone every play. And you gradually saw over the course of that season the improvement, where he got a lot better at, kind of making cuts. But I think he may have actually even overcorrected a little bit, to your point. Where, I think he's kind of finding that balance again. And again, he had some injury issues last year, but, towards the middle of the season. But as soon as he was healthy, I mean, you could just see he is one of the most dangerous playmakers in college football. So considering what they have coming back there and just the experience of the line, I mean, the running game can be scary good for Penn State this year. So, a lot of reason to be optimistic about what Penn State can do and what their offense can do overall, but especially on the ground.
Absolutely. And yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say the other thing too is we have some experienced running backs now. Some experienced running backs behind Catron and Singleton. For the last 3 years, they've mostly been pretty much carrying the load. It's done wonders to help allow them split carries. But now, we can even keep them a little fresher and kind of, lean on perhaps Quentin Martin. Corey Smith showed some great potential. Hopefully he bulked up a little bit over the offseason because he's got some really some great moves and some great what do you call it? Just he's really good at finding ways to avoid tacklers. And
I'll remember Corey Smith for his near touchdown against Washington in garbage time last year. I think it ended up being like 75 yards. He just ended up like 10 yards short of the end zone when he got tackled. But I thought he was going to take that to the house. But he showed some great speed. Cam Wallace is another guy. I think hopefully he's gotten healthy after season-ending. I don't know what it was, an ACL tear or some kind of season-ending injury he unfortunately suffered against Kent State, I believe it was last year. But
he was also promising too.
Another name to keep an eye on, I think, is true freshman Tyke Hayes. He's been apparently turning some heads. I'm sure he might see the field a little bit in, some garbage time. But I think going forward, though, for 2026 and beyond, he's probably a name you're going to hear a lot of. So,
it's
a nice. Of course, Messiah Mickens comes in next year too.
Running back position's in a great spot right now. I'm just considering how fortunate Penn State's been to have Singleton and Allen sharing the backfield for 4 years now. That's just really special. It's something you don't really ever see. For them to come.
Probably thank the NIL era for that.
Yeah, that is very true. Yeah, and then they'll both be moving on next year, and there's going to be a good stable of backs waiting in the wings. So running backs position is definitely a good spot for certain.
Absolutely. And speaking of good positions, whatever you're saying, good positions. The offensive line, they return all but one starter from last year, and they got some nice depth behind the starters as well. Drew Shelton, the guy who's Drew Shelton, Nick Dawkins, especially. Those are a couple of guys who've seen their share of action.
Having an experienced center who's going to help lead the offense, that's absolutely huge. I think there's a lot of guys that came back that, were probably on the fence, that probably a lot of Penn State fans assumed probably wouldn't be back. Dawkins is a guy who maybe, kind of got buried a little bit. Didn't get quite the attention, but that's a really, really big thing for him to come back for one more season. Have an experienced center to anchor the line.
You got Chocolate Thunder's son anchoring the O-line, former NBA player Daryl Dawkins. So imagine it can't hurt to have a kid born with those athletic genes to be back for a 5th year, 6th year. I want to say it's a 6th year. I think it was a 2020.
I want to say that. Yeah, I believe it is.
He's one of those last of the COVID guys on the team. So nice to have him back. And of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention our favorite man in motion, Venga Ioane, your starting left tackle. All 6'4", 335 pounds of him. Moving in motion was just absolute poetry last year. To see it happen, then decking the guy.
Yeah, could you imagine being an outside backer and just seeing that guy coming your direction?
I don't know how they're not crapping their pants.
That would be an appropriate response, honestly.
But he's back. And then also on the right side of the ball, Cooper Cousins will fill in for Sal Wormley's old starting spot at right tackle. Although he didn't start, he did play. Did see some action last year.
But you're talking about a 5-star recruit, who's got a world of potential. And the thing that really struck me the most about Cousins last year is that, during spring camp, people who were watching practice were saying, if you didn't know any better, you'd assume he was an upperclassman. The way he would prepare and practice and stay after, he had this like a sense of urgency around about him. And that, he kind of, it was like he came on board and he already knew like, okay, this is what I need to do to really succeed, to be a standout player, to help this team win games. So, when you have a guy that's that talented, that's also, your hardest worker, one of your hardest workers, that trickles down. So, we'll see if all that hard work paid off for Cousins, but I think he's going to be a standout, definitely a future standout, potentially standout this year. And someone who I'm really excited about this year is Anthony Donka. He got injured, missed the second half of the season, but I thought he was our best lineman up to that point. Definitely our best run blocker. I mean, he was a guy who can just take the guy in front of him and move him out of the way. And, you do that and have Singleton and Allen running behind you into some wide open holes that they can navigate, then good things are going to happen. So really excited to have Donka back in the fold. From what I understand, he's been full go, completely, back from his injury and will be ready to start day one. So
apparently be him and Nolan Rucci fighting for a starting spot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and whoever doesn't win it's also going to play quite a bit, And Rucci's another guy who, after Donka got hurt, he came on. He was kind of someone who, he was a 5-star as well, and kind of seemed like he had some untapped potential when he came in. But as soon as he got in there and got his chance, I mean, I thought he played some really outstanding football. The rest of the way. So. Yeah, whoever is on the losing end of that battle, they're still going to get plenty of playing time and,
absolutely,
have a future in the NFL. So Penn State's in very good.
And that's part of why they're getting so
spot.
much hype. It's not just the starters; it's the depths, and he also, I think he did mention Dom Ruley. Maybe I didn't hear you.
No,
Dom Ruley, he's mostly playing special teams, but he's a guy who could come off the bench and fill in at certain spots. He was the guy who's responsible for making the fake punt run call for Luke Reynolds against Minnesota last year. He could factor in. Another guy I actually didn't mention, Alex Birchmeyer, former blue chip recruits, the 2023 class. Could see him.
Yeah, I've heard some good things about Javon Williams as well. So
Javon Williams, yes.
Point, I mean, the two deep is looking really outstanding. So where I would say you could take everyone who is a backup who's likely going to at least rotate in this year, and they're much better than most of the offensive lines, Penn State offensive lines we probably see in our lifetime. Yeah, so obviously a great spot for the offensive line. I think both of our Penn State fandom basically encompasses the Big Ten era based off of our age. So this definitely has the potential to be the best Penn State offensive line we've seen in our lifetime. I'm
even over the '94 team.
Possibly, yeah. I mean, when you consider the quality from end to end and the first team, second team, maybe there might not be a Jeff Hardings on the line, but there's some guys that are stars in their own right and a lot of depth. And if you get an inevitable injury or two, you got plenty of other guys who can step in there. So really excited to see what this offensive line can be. I'm in my dream scenario, they go out there and they just prove to be one of those great offensive lines that can just push people around and make things easy for the offense. So we just have to kind of go out there and execute. You don't need to rely on keeping defenses on their toes or trickeration. You just kind of go play some old school football, put a hat in a hat, and move your guy out of the way, and run the ball right down their throat. So we'll see if that happens that way, but yeah, I'm optimistic it might.
Yeah, I'll
say I'm definitely much more optimistic than any other year, where I'm just thinking, okay, I hope we can play well despite the offensive line, as we've seen too many years in the past.
It wasn't that long ago. It was a running joke, like, oh, this year will be the year for the offensive line. But now the last 2 to 3 years, it's
you turn that corner.
Strength.
Mm-hmm.
And so, speaking of positions that have been weak in recent times, that hopefully might turn into strengths. We'll talk about the receivers just in a moment. But before that, just want to make a quick pitch. if you haven't already, if you like what you see here and you're not subscribed to our YouTube channel, please do so. The Black Shoe Diaries PSU is the name if you search for it on YouTube. Got 182 subscribers when I just checked it before we started. So I don't know. Let's see if we can try to get to 200 before the Nevada game, Jared.
I think so. I think that's a
I think it's
reasonable
possible.
goal.
Let's try and get that number to 200 subscribers before the Nevada game, and maybe we'll get a show of shirtless Pat again or something, or we'll have him do something crazy for 200 subscribers. And also check us out, blackshoediaries.com. We are exactly, as of they were recording us, 40 days away from the start of the season against Nevada. So we do our daily countdown series right now, in which we honor a current player in the roster, or maybe we honor like a certain play that went for a certain number of yards that matches the number of days left until. So, for example, I think the other day we had a 41-yard touchdown run from Nick Singleton against Bowling Green. I want to say that was to commemorate 41 days to Penn State football. So,
yeah, his touchdown to clinch the game, which going into it, I don't think we were expecting that we would, be celebrating a long touchdown run from Singleton to clinch it, but, we'll take it.
Absolutely. And of course, we're now going into our reasons for optimism and concerns and amongst other things. And of course, we'll be recording these videos on a weekly basis now. Next week, we'll preview the defense, and then I believe Patrick and Clay Sauertig, former BSD colleague of ours, have something planned for the first week of August. And then before you know it, we'll be getting into the our yearly schedule preview, our marathon schedule preview. So you'll want to check that out definitely. But Black Shoe Diaries PSU, our YouTube channel, blackshoediaries.com, our website. Please like and subscribe to the YouTube and check out our website. So end of pitch there, Jared. Back to the offense. I know I mentioned receivers, but we'll get back to that in a second. But let's touch on tight ends real quick. Obviously, we know Tyler Warren's gone. Mr. Do everything for the offense, it seemed like last year, whether it was catching passes or running the wildcat, or even throwing passes, or snapping the ball to
even snapping the ball.
Throws it to Allar, who throws it back to Warren. He just did it all. So he's gone, but does not mean the tight ends are going to be in trouble without him. It was mentioned before, Luke Reynolds is back. He had that notable fake punt run against Minnesota last year, which helped Penn State ultimately just run out the clock and not even give the Gophers a chance to kick a game-winning field goal. I think he also had a touchdown catch against Purdue in garbage time, I want to say, off the top of my head. So he's back. And Khalil Dinkins, a guy who, I think we've said this before, just a guy who just doesn't quite get enough hype and credit, but he's been a very effective target in the red zone. He'll be back for his last year. And I think, maybe he can play an even bigger role now that Warren's gone.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see the role that he plays in the offense, like you said, with Warren out. It's interesting because, Warren had a historically incredible season, one of the best, single seasons we've seen from a tight end in college football history, really, when you look at all the records that he set and just, his insane amount of production. But, they lost him. He's a 14th overall pick to the Colts. And I think the tight end room is in a phenomenal position, despite, losing one of the all-time greats in program history at tight end. Just starting with Dinkins, he's the most experienced guy, pretty good all around tight end, good blocker, reliable receiver. He hasn't been, has a whole lot of opportunities because, Warren played such a big part of the offense. But the thing about Dinkins is that he not only is reliable, but they look at him an awful lot on 3rd and 4th downs. So, they just shows that the trust is there. They know what his ability is. They know how dependable he is. He's a guy who can, end up getting a lot of looks this year and have a very productive season as a pass catcher. But, I'd say his floor is, probably 25 catches and, probably like 22 of those are going to be for first downs. So, he could be one of those players who, even if he's not, setting records like Warren, he's going to be a guy who's going to have a big impact on just about every game and make a lot of, big catches that are going to help move the chains, get Penn State in the end zone, keep drives alive. So I think he'll be a very important part of the offense. Luke Reynolds could easily be a superstar in the making. The one thing I that made me really excited about his potential was kind of hearing about him prior to his freshman year when he was at, the different camps with all the other, elite players, 5-star players. And I would hear that he was the guy that people were really noticing. People from outside of the Penn State beat were mentioning this. So when you've got a guy who is, standing out amongst the very best competition, he's got the chance to be something special. And, if it wasn't for Warren, he probably would have played quite a bit more, got a lot more looks, had a much bigger role. If you look back a few years, early in the Franklin era when Penn State was coming off the sanctions and everything, he would have been a big part of the offense as a true freshman. He didn't have to quite play that role last year. He kind of got to sit and learn. And when he did got the opportunities, he made a lot of highlight reel catches and got off to a promising start. And, he was kind of a guy that Penn State could just hide away and use in that key moment against Minnesota on that fake punt. I mean, the staff knows that he's a difference maker and he's capable of making big time plays when you really need it. So I'm excited to see what he can do as part of the offense. And, and then even you look at Andrew Rappleyea.
Mm-hmm.
So Adam or Andrew,
It's Andrew Rappleyea.
Andrew, thank you. I think I got him and Brenneman. I combined the two, but Rappleyea, if you remember last year's blue-white game, and he actually did start the West Virginia game. He got hurt shortly after that, and so he missed essentially the entire season. But he's a guy who's just incredibly athletic for his size, can create a lot of mismatches. So if he comes back and he's healthy, Penn State's got 3 really, really exciting options at tight end. So I think we'll see some, still see some 2 tight end sets. And, I think whether it's one guy that kind of takes the lead as far as the main pass catcher or it's divided up, I think however it works out, the tight end position is in really good shape, and they're going to really contribute and be a strength for the offense this year.
Yeah, and I would also just add Andrew Oles, true freshman, coming in. He was, I don't know, he was a 5-star or maybe just a very high 4-star, but Pennsylvania kid, was committed to Michigan for the longest time, but it was kind of a surprise flip. I think we were all convinced he was going to sign with Michigan, but his staff, to their credit, kept on him, and obviously they helped it. They finally broke through into the playoffs last year, but something convinced him to flip last minute and become a Nittany Lion and be a part of the tight end tradition here. So, maybe a guy you see get some playing time, maybe on special teams, maybe see some action in garbage time, but another guy to keep an eye on for sure.
Yeah, and he could play what Luke Reynolds was last year. Get some looks here and there. Isn't a regular part of the offense, but makes most of his opportunities. Gets to see the field on special teams. Cut his teeth a little bit, and then in 2026, you're looking at him having a much bigger role.
Yep, and I guess we're gonna move on to we're saving the best for last.
Yeah, but this is what everyone who stuck around, I'm sure, was waiting to hear our take on the receivers. So
yes, all 2 of you that are watching us, thanks for doing so. So Jared, remind me how many catches do the wide receivers have against Notre Dame in the semifinal?
I'm sure everyone already knows the answer, but it was a big old goose egg. You get to the college football semifinals, and your receivers combined for 0 receptions. So that kind of tells the whole story. I not certain what I was writing, not too a couple months some off-season content, but I mentioned that in a game that was that close, that competitive, with that tight of margins, perhaps one catch is all the difference between Penn State going to the national title game and getting a rematch against Ohio State. But, we got 4 quarters, almost overtime, and 0 catches. So obviously there's some room for improvement. And Penn State looked to the transfer portal, brought in some pretty intriguing guys, definitely some productive players. And now we'll just see how they gel and what they can do in the first year in this offense.
Absolutely. So, talk about some of those guys. And so I think, maybe the one that's been getting the most amount of hype is Trevor Pena from Syracuse. He was the Orange's top receiver last year. Had 84 catches, 941 yards, and 9 touchdowns. Also had a rushing touchdown on top of that. But to be fair, I mean, he did play in a more pass-happy offense at Syracuse. And, I doubt he's going to put up those same numbers at Penn State, but he doesn't have to. He just needs to be a guy who can just get open, make the catch, move the chains. That's essentially his role. And, if he can just do that, I mean, you've got some improvement at the position already.
Yeah, and I'm not certain how many people are aware of this, but Kyle McCord was actually the leading passer in the nation last year. So Syracuse definitely had a very pass heavy offense. It won't quite be the same with Penn State, so I'll be shocked if he matches those numbers, but he doesn't need to. If he catches 50 or 60 balls and he's a reliable option that Penn State has just completely lacked at that position group the last 3 seasons, then that's kind of what we need. Another thing too with Kodlnicki is that that slot receiver plays such a key role, and he didn't really have that last year. Nothing against Omari Evans. I wish him all the best this upcoming season. Hope he has a really big season. But he basically had that deep post, and that was about it. It kind of seemed like every time they tried to run him a hook or just run him out to the flat and try to connect on a 3rd and 6. He was just never in the right position. Allar just could not connect with him. So, I think having a more reliable slot in Pena can just make all the difference and just really add a new element to the offense that they've been lacking. And you have that in addition to a good offensive line and running game, then it just makes the offense that much more dangerous and just really makes the defense cover the entire field, which is something they didn't have to do last couple seasons with Penn State's, considering the receiving core and the fact that, the 23 Allar didn't really go look deep that often. This past year did a little bit more, but the receivers were kind of easy to lock down. So, it's just going to make the offense that much harder to stop if the defense really has to stay honest and just cover the entire field, as opposed to just kind of writing off certain players, certain areas, and focus on stopping the run or just finding the routes that Allar is most comfortable in.
Yeah, and also expected to start along with Pena are a couple other transfers. Kyron Hudson from USC. Didn't put up the bodiest numbers, 38 catches, 462 yards, 3 touchdowns, but he was a reliable set of hands.
Yeah. In Hudson's defense, too, he didn't have – I mean, he had a good season, wasn't insanely productive or anything like that, but I think a lot of that had to do with USC making the decision to bench Miller Moss, who, wasn't a phenomenal, wasn't going to win the Heisman or anything, but he was a pretty decent quarterback and put up some pretty good numbers. So when they tried to, see what they had behind him and didn't really work out as well, the offense really suffered. And so did Hudson's numbers. But you want to talk about big playability. I mean, I'm sure by now everyone's probably seen that highlight against LSU one of the most incredible catches I've seen in a college game. He had a touchdown against Penn State when Penn State, needed that frantic last minute drive to send overtime where they eventually won. So he's got ability. And he's one of those guys that I think Allar's kind of been missing where he can throw it up to and just he can go up and get it, someone like and you think back to the 16 season, where Trace was just kind of the master of those 50-50 balls. He's one of those guys that, hey, nothing's working, or we just need a big play, or we need to keep the defense offense, throw it up to Hudson and see what he can do. So he also adds a pretty interesting element to the offense for sure.
Also adding an element is Devontae Ross, who I think we can agree he's like your home run, your deep threat, your speedster. You guess he would play the Omari Evans role this year, but hopefully much more than just being able to run a fly pattern, a post route for a.
From what I saw, he's a lot more versatile. He can go in the middle, he can catch it in traffic. Obviously, he's got the speed. He's good after the catch. He can go deep. So he's a very he's just got a lot of juice. He's a guy who can really catch a short screen pass and take it the distance. So
also a pretty good.
The one thing that pretty good. What?
He's also pretty good on special teams.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, I'd imagine he'll end up being the starting punt returner. And the one thing that jumped out at me at Ross is when we landed him, I looked at his stats thinking, okay, he's coming from Troy. Did he have, a couple games where he had 300 yards receiving against the a couple of terrible defenses? And it wasn't like that at all. He was consistently good. And the thing that really jumped out at me is that he had a monster game against Iowa. And look up those highlights. And, Iowa always has a phenomenal secondary, always putting guys in their secondary in the NFL. And he was very, very hard for them to cover.
I think he burned them one time for a touchdown, like just got behind the secondary.
Yeah, I want to say his numbers were like 138 and 2 touchdowns or something like that. So we didn't have anyone in this offense last year that could have done that against Iowa's defense. I'll go on the ledge and say that for sure. So I think, I think he'll be a pleasant surprise. He's actually my pick to be Penn State's leading receiver at the end of the season.
So one thing I've read about Ross, because according to like Inside on 24/7 and the On3 site, guess he's been banged up he hasn't been practicing really. They're they're hoping maybe he'll be back for fall practice, and it sounds like he's not expected to miss any games. But obviously, you'd like to see him be able to practice sooner rather than later and just keep building that rapport with Drew, because these are just like Pena and Hudson, he's a transfer. So you just, the more reps you can get before the actual game start, the better. But the nice thing is at least this year, the non-conference slate is, easy street with Nevada, FIU, and Villanova. So I think, those will all be good games for Drew to, really work with his receivers and just try to just establish some, good rapport with them.
Yeah, considering how the way the schedule unfolds, I do think that's a great opportunity. You have 3 games that, you should definitely win and be able to get the backups in fairly early, hopefully second half. But I really hope that they use that as an opportunity to build the rapport between Allar and what's shaping up to be 3 transfers who are your starting receivers. So I think that's a golden opportunity for them to really use those 3 games to just fine tune the passing game, take your bye week, and then boom, Oregon's coming to town for the whiteout. So great opportunity for them. But yeah, to your point, yeah, it's going to come down to, they're all new. Are they going to be able to find the right chemistry with Allar? Are they going to be able to pick up Colton Nicky's offense? Are they going to be able to build that rapport with Drew? So a lot of ifs, but the one thing we do know is there's a lot of production in the receiver room, which is something we haven't seen for a while.
That's certainly a big thing. just a couple of the other names to keep an eye on, even though they're not predicted starters. Liam Clifford, redshirt senior. I'm sure he's a guy who will see some action. He actually he shined against some of the lesser opponents in the schedule. I think
especially UCLA had a game.
I was say I think he went over 100 yards against UCLA. That's the one that sticks out to me the most. So, and of course, if Penn State,
the thing that concerns me about him,
they built big enough.
I was just going to say with Cliff.
Yeah.
Yeah. The thing that concerns me about Clifford is he didn't really play much, or he played, but he didn't really get a whole lot of looks the second half of the season. So I don't know if that was the staff deciding, receivers just aren't getting the job done. We're not going to look as much, or what the situation was there. But when they did look his way, he showed he had reliable hands, and would like to see him carve out a bigger role and be that dependable guy that you can add to the overall repertoire. One guy I think could be a wild card this year. I haven't given up on yet, and hopefully, exactly. He was I think he was like the 76 overall recruit in his class. Out of Columbus. So would love to see him shine at Penn State. Had some injury issues last year. I think basically the extent of his playing time was fair catching, he had four fair catches of punt returners, and then he was out for the rest of the season. So he's shown at times he's got some big playability. So we'll see if he can stay healthy, put it together, because he could be a really interesting piece of the puzzle and be someone who, I think a lot of people may have forgotten about, but can, really produce this upcoming year.
Yeah, it feels like kind of a now or never situation for Saunders as far as being a contributor of sorts to the team. So, and also one more name, Tyser Denmark.
Yep, that was the next name we wanted to bring up.
Catching a touchdown as time expired against Maryland, which set off Mike Loxley and the post-game handshake with Franklin. But he's a guy who he was drawing some hype last off season as a true freshman, and he's a guy who I think much like Liam Clifford especially, I think is a guy you expect to come off the bench and give one of the starters some breathers. And
I heard always hear Denmark, left a great impression on the staff, and they really liked the way he improved from the start to the end of the season. So definitely sounds like he's on the right path to have a role in this offense at the very least. I don't know if he'll be a starter or he'll be a really regular target, but he's got some big playability and could be someone who could put together a promising season and then really become a big time playmaker next year. Hopefully has a starting role once the new transfers have moved on. And going back to the Maryland game, I was so happy for him in that moment, because if you remember the Purdue game, he was completely wide open, streaking down the field, and the ball bounced right off of his visor. So got a little caught up in the moment, as sometimes it happens when you're a true freshman and you've got that easy that ball that's you just have to put your hand out and catch it. So it was really good that he got to make up for that and kind of showed what he could do against Maryland, and end the regular season on a very positive note. And hey, if you're pissing off people from Maryland, that's always a win in my book. So very happy to see him have that moment, something he can build on, and just have a bigger role this year and build on that.
Yeah, one more true freshman this year, but who showcased some things in the spring game, Kobe Howard, another guy to just keep an eye on. I've maybe if he could potentially see some playing time. It's maybe either in garbage time or to give someone a breather. Or could see him on special teams as well. But I was impressed with his speed, and he's kind of a guy who could emerge as a deep threat down the line. Maybe not this year, but afterwards.
It's a nice blend right now for the receiver room. I wish these guys had been around longer, had more experience with this offense, so you could, more of a sure thing. But it is a nice blend of experience, production, and potential. between the guys that came in here and considering what they did at their respective schools last year, the guys who are rising up the pipeline. I know the receiver room has been really holding the offense back. Let's be frank. These last 2 seasons, they really weren't able to keep the defenses honest last year, and really made it easier to defend a pretty talented overall offense. So I think they're definitely heading in the right direction. Hopefully these new guys can gel. And, like I was saying, we've just got some younger guys who could really kind of take the next step. And, 1, 2, 3 years down the road, you're looking at a lot of guys who could be, create a pretty effective receiver room.
Yeah, I tend to agree. And I think really the theme for the offense this year, obviously it's I'd say, let's be honest, it's the main reason why there's so much preseason hype. And yes, the defense, which we will preview next week, I think they'll be damn good again, even despite losing Abdul Carter. They're going to be damn good again this year.
Sure.
And I think they could be perhaps even better. So I think they got a major upgrade with Jim Knowles as defensive coordinator. No disrespect to Tom Allen, who did a fine job last year, but
he's also not known as the best defensive coordinator in college football.
Exactly. And you take him from the from the defending champions of all teams. But that alone is not the reason why. That's not the main reason why. It's definitely a reason, but if the offense wasn't returning Drew Allard, Nick Singleton, Katron Allen, 4 out of the 5 offensive line starters, and they didn't hit the portal for some serious wide receiver additions. I mean, we wouldn't be getting this kind of hype right now. So I think the key is just going to be, if this team wants to realize its national championship dreams, obviously, as you mentioned, Jared, receivers, biggest thing, cannot lay a goose egg in receptions in the college football playoff semifinals. And also, I think with better receivers, Drew Allard will look better, but there are some things he can still improve on. And as we said before, just got to play better against the top teams on the schedule. And as I said, maybe he tends to get a little too fired up for the big games. And, it takes him like a half to calm down sometimes and start making the throws that he routinely makes instead of, sailing him past his guys. And of course, the running backs, we mentioned, Singleton, Allen, obviously beasts, but they each have ways they can improve. And I'm hopeful Stan Drayton will get those out of them, just get those slight improvements that can just make them just take them to the next level, make them truly elite backs.
Yeah, and I meant to touch on this. We're talking about the running backs, but the one thing that comes with college running backs over time is their vision improves, because they're all these guys that are getting D1 offers. They were so good in high school, and going back to Pee Wee, they could probably just outrun everyone. So they take the ball, they run past the defense, or they run over the defense. And college is a totally different ball game. So you see experienced running backs vision, they see the whole field, they know when and where to cut. So I do think both, and not like Allen and Singleton didn't already know how to do that, but you'll just see a more advanced ability with another experience out of both of them there.
Absolutely. So I think you make those slight improvements, and if the receiver room gets a big boost like we're hoping it will, sky's the limit for this team, in my opinion. So
kind of wish I could wake up and tomorrow would be August 30th. I'm not
right.
After talking about the offense this long and just what.
Only got another 40 days, my friend. So we'll be here before you know it.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts, Jared, before?
I'll just say with offense in general, to just really oversimplify thing, having a good offense is hard. It's very hard to go out there, execute, and have all 11 guys on the same page and have the right scheme. Having a great offense is much more difficult than having a great defense, I would say. And with that being said, though, to your point, Penn State's got a ton of returning experience, talent, production. So, this could be a really special offense. Potentially the best we've seen since '94 for the blue and white. So,
very high bar, but I think
yeah,
it's deserving.
and I don't know if anyone will ever match that, but I wouldn't be surprised if we're ranking the Penn State offense of the Big Ten era. Hopefully we're going to say 94, then 2025 is right after that. They definitely have the potential to do so.
Absolutely, and time will tell. Hopefully, we're right in that sense. But we'll see. Like I said, 40 days until we start to find out for sure. But thanks for checking us out once again. Black Shoe Diaries PSU. That's our YouTube channel. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Try and get to 200 subscribers before August 30th. So if you can help us out there, it'd be awesome. And of course, check out Jared and ours and Patrick's and all of our other wonderful colleagues' work at blackshoediaries.com. As I said before, we're in the thick of the football off season. Before you know it, the games will be starting, and we'll have your weekly in-season content coming for you as well. So you'll want to stick around for that. That'll include also videos. We do usually every Wednesday we do a opponent preview, and then right after the game on Saturdays we do a live post-game reaction show. So you'll want to check those out too. So thanks for tuning in, everyone. We'll be back next week with our defensive preview.